Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a special episode of the Media Boat Podcast. This is our part of our end of the year wrap-up special. We've
Hmm.
gone through music, we've gone through video games, we've gone through TV, and we finally made it all the way to the movie section. My
Yes.
name is Mike. His name is Matt.
My name is Matt, and his name is Mike. Thank you for joining us for the Media Boat 2024 year-end wrap-up specials. Yes, we are finally to movies, our final and last special of these four categories. And yeah, if you're not familiar with how we do these, what we do is in two parts. We talk about the most important story of the year, news story of the year in that category. Then we go into our top five lists. In this case, today, we'll talk about a top five movies of the year. And then we will crown one movie to be the Media Boat podcast's favorite movie of 2024. So, yeah, I guess without further ado, we can just kind of slide right into it and start with the
Yep.
weekend. Wait, no. We start with the news stories. You have narrowed it down, I believe, to do we even need to do the two, or we can just pretty much just explain what our number one story is?
I think we just explained what our number one story is
Yeah.
because we've been talking about it the last couple of weeks during our regular box office. In
Yeah.
fact, it was one of our stories at the beginning of December as we led into it, with Wicked coming in after the Thanksgiving weekend. But our top story here
Mhm.
for movie section is the box office, but more specifically about how we're back, baby. The
Yeah.
sequels have returned.
Yeah. Last year, our story was about how movies were back. That big event movies were back with Barbenheimer, topping the box office records again, like time and time again. And we kind of set us up for 2024, which was going to be that. And sure enough, we got that. But unlike Barbie and Oppenheimer, instead we got big events around sequels. There's one notable exception. We will talk about Wicked today, but like Wicked is not a sequel. It will get its sequel next year. But like for now, just just treat Wicked as a weird outlier. It is like an exception that proves the rule, I guess. But generally speaking, the rest of the big hits this year were all sequels, to the point where you just looked prior to this recording that up until the top 15, it is pretty much mostly sequels.
Yes, and these aren't like sequels, prequels, reboots, remakes. No, these are direct sequels
No.
following movies that have already come out. So the top
Yeah.
of the list here is Inside Out 2, making the
Yeah.
billion-dollar mark at 1.6. Well, let's call it 1.7. It's going to cross it. But yeah, that's your number one movie of the year. Coming in at two is Deadpool and
Yeah.
Wolverine at $1.3 billion. Then too much, maybe probably everyone's surprised here. Despicable Me 4, you ask why they keep making these movies? I'll tell you why.
They make money.
$970 million worldwide is why they keep making those movies.
Yeah, and you might be thinking, well, this seems like this is just a story from the latter half of the year. What about the first half? And here's my argument for that, is because this is just the results of a movie industry that was already primed for this to happen.
Hmm.
It's, I think, what happened with the Marvel era from Disney is it is trained now the studios to be as safe as possible. And that means that you mostly going to see things that they see as safe bets, which is sequels to existing IP. Like this is you see parallels of this in television, but also most importantly, you see parallels to this in video games. This story is not too dissimilar from our video game story, which we decided upon in our previous video game special for here these wrap up 2024 specials.
Hmm.
The big studios don't know how to make money anymore. And the way that they can feel safe is by putting out a sequel to something that already exists, like IP that we're already familiar with. And that's why I think you see it. But the difference between, but the big news here is that it has worked. This year, it has worked better than probably any other year that I can think of off the top of my head. Inside Out 2 is a perfect example. Disney was so burned by some recent hits that were written, or some recent movies that they put out that were original that bombed, like Wish from last year, that they were
Mhm.
so adamant about, like, no, let's throw out the rule book. Let's go back to what we know. Let's put out a sequel to one of our most successful Pixar movies. And it paid dividends. It basically has put Disney back on the map, back to number one, back where they were before the pandemic, like nothing happened.
Yeah, it's exactly kind of what we fear with everyone just
Yeah.
pulling out sequel after sequel after sequel. But as we say here on the Beautiful Podcast, it's a business. And the studios are going to look at
Yeah.
this and see this made money, this made money, this made money. Their IPs make money. Like we said, Wicked is currently sitting at number 8 worldwide at $540 million. And that's
Yeah.
based off existing IP, all of the musical, all of the book.
Right.
But yeah, like you mentioned, all the way at number 15 is It Ends With Us, which is in a well, I think that's actually based off book too, but
Yeah.
original movie. But that tops out at $350 million. So compare that to Inside Out 2, which made 1.7 billion. They're going to try and shoot for the $1 billion mark every single time. And the
Yeah.
last time we talked about sequels dominating the box office was 2019, right before the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
Actually, I think it was like 2018 and 2019. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's the last time, like, it was just sequel after sequel after sequel. And everyone felt like, oh, so many sequels. I'm getting burned out here. Got to watch everything. Well,
Right.
guess what? This time it
It's
only
happening
took
again.
5 years to get back there.
Yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of things that are like a lot of different stories that kind of tie into this, including, like people returning to movies after the pandemic, studios consolidating, more consolidation, more closures of smaller boutique studios
Mhm.
also leads to this happening. Though I do have to say that thankfully there are still original movies that are out there that are out there that need your support, that are out there, and we're going to talk about them, a lot of them today. I was looking at my own list. Out of my top five, four of them, only one of my top five is a sequel. Like the rest of the four are original movies that act as their own thing. So don't worry, we're still
Yep.
going to be here to recommend these original films for you. We're going to still be here as a bastion of like the independent cinema, but this is still an important news story because, yeah, it goes to show you where we're at, where this business is at. And it is just happens to be like back in that zone where the studios need safe bets, don't want to take risks anymore, and are terrified of big flops.
Yep. I've got one sequel on my list. The rest are unique movies. Two
Hmm.
of them are very offbeat, off the wall movies that I'm going to try and repitch you on watching. But yeah, I think also one of the takeaways here is Disney's bet on Moana 2, taking
Yeah.
it from what was going to be a Disney Plus show, putting it into theaters, and currently sitting at $730 million.
Yeah. It,
That's a
it,
good bet,
it's an
but
interesting
it's
example
an
too,
interesting bet.
because
Yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting example too, because great bet when you're talking about box office. Critically, though, it ended up being a bad bet because the word of mouth on that thing was toxic. So you have the story. The Moana 2 is a perfect example of a tale of two stories, right? Because you have the story of, oh yeah, it made money because it has Moana on the box, but also everybody knew what they were doing. It's like, no,
Mhm.
everybody knows, like they figured out immediately, oh yeah, this thing that you took of television series and put in and edited into a movie, yeah, we can all tell because it's worse. So yeah, it is what
Yes,
it is.
but
But yeah,
box office
this
numbers go up. I mean,
right.
yes, Moana 2 came out the week after Wicked. It still is yet to catch Wicked. I don't think it will.
Yeah, no, I don't think it will. But still, that being said, the fact that it is successful is going to empower Disney to use this tactic in the future. Which again, like we said a couple weeks ago when we were talking about Moana 2's success, brings into question their strategy with Disney Plus. What does that mean for Disney Plus going forward? Well, 2025 will tell us.
Well, we did talk about how Disney removed, or I don't know if they removed themselves, but Jennifer Lee, who was at the head of Disney Animation,
Right.
is stepping away from the head to focus on, hey, more sequels, Frozen 3 and Frozen 4, and leaving
Yeah.
behind the person who did, I think it was Coco.
Yeah.
as the new head of Disney Animation.
And hey, Coco is probably my favorite Pixar movie. So maybe that's a good choice. However, the sequel stuff worries me. And so, yeah, we're going to have to see what happens ultimately, because this means that Disney will be more empowered than ever to get Frozen 3 out the door as fast as possible.
Yep, and like I said, not just Disney with Frozen 3, with the upcoming Avengers movies that'll be
Mhm.
here, oh God, 2026 to 2027. But look out for like more Kung Fu Panda movies, more
Yeah,
Despicable Me movies, more Godzilla cross X Kong movies.
yeah,
Uh Maybe another Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes or Planet of the Apes
maybe.
movie.
Yeah, it's
Twisters 3, it's coming. Get Glenn Powell in the middle of nowhere.
so yeah, it's good news if you're a studio, good news if you're a CEO. It's maybe not so great news if you are someone who enjoys original movies. But then again, it is a business and we just have to deal with it.
Yes, but we here at the Media Broadcast, we like original movies, which is why
Yes.
most of them make up our top five lists.
Yes, and why don't we start into your top five movies?
All right. So yeah, I'll start with my number five movie. And I don't know if this is on your list because I believe this
Find
is a
out.
movie you told me to watch.
Okay.
And I was iffy going into it, but it's a weird movie. I like weird, but oh boy, is this weird. Like this is very
Well,
mileage will definitely vary if you like this or not. I'm talking about I saw the TV glow. And I don't know if this is on your list or not, but I saw the TV glow is definitely not going to be on any like top of the year, best end of the year lists. But it's also a film that I couldn't stop thinking about after I watched it.
mhm,
Just something about the pink opaque, like the more you delve into it, the more like you start thinking about it, be like, well, that's weird, but that's super weird. But it makes sense
mhm,
all within the like concept of the film. And then when you get to that monologue at the start of Act Three,
mhm,
just that in itself, how weird and kind of almost deranged sounding it goes, only to come full circle and be like, oh wait, no, it's about to hit me like a semi truck. That it's all beautifully well shot and executed. That it had to make my list. I could not leave it off my list. So yeah, I mean it's here at number five, but
mhm.
I don't know if it's on your list or not. I think it might be. But it's
It is.
I'm glad you turned me on to this film because I think it's one thing that it's an easy film to be like, well, I don't know, maybe maybe like I'll watch it eventually, but not like really rush out to see it. And I can see why. Watching the trailer first thing gives you zero context of what you're about to get yourself into. Like it loosely sets it up, but
Yeah.
absolutely like does not give you any type of hint to be like, yeah, this is what it's really about. And I can see why, but definitely glad that I watched this and you made me watch this
Mhm.
and that it ended up here on my top five.
Yeah, no, that's all the case for me. It is on my list. It's higher. Is what I will say. And I'll talk about my feelings more in detail later about it. But yeah, no, I'm glad that you appreciated it. I'm glad that you watched it because yeah, it is a little bit of a hard sell because when you're going into it, you're like, what is this? What is this about? What's going on here? And yeah, it does it's something that really sits with you because of I think how hard it is to really penetrate. And like once it's in you, like you do think about it for a very long time.
Yes. Speaking about what's once it gets in you, that comes me to my next movie at number four. It's What's Inside.
Mm,
Now, I tried to convince you to watch this, and I don't know if you ended up doing it
I
or not. I
haven't
don't think
had
you
a
did your
chance.
homework. But it's takes their simple premise of body swapping,
Mm,
but puts it into a fun kind of like night among friends that quickly turns into a chaotic nightmare. But what really sells me on It's What's Inside is the directing, the acting, and the use of colors in this thing. You can do so much with just your simple reds, greens, and blues in here that it creates this instant dynamic and feeling of uneasiness about who's talking between who, as you also try and figure out who's in what spot, who's in whose body. But as
Mhm.
soon as you do and start piecing it together, it hits you like, oh, oh, oh. And the way these actors in here, I can see them going places because they not only have to act as themselves in their own character, but when you do the body swapping, they got to act as each other,
Yeah,
and then you got to act as each other again. And it's so well done and so well made that even though it's not a whole lot of like a big cast of characters and not a whole lot of different set changes, like all takes place within a single house on a single night, it's super well crafted that it kind of like highlights interesting and unique cinema. It highlights that creativity that can come from movies.
yeah,
And like I said, simple premise. You body swap. Seems simple enough, but when you start adding layers of past dynamics between each characters, then it gets into all the complexity of it.
yeah.
And the way they did the flashback sequence of people talking about like what happened in the past, super well done, super creative. I haven't seen anything quite like it, and I hope more people use this kind of technique in the future going forward.
Yeah, no. Sounds really neat. It sounds like a great example of things that movies do really well. Like I think that and you don't see that a whole lot in this like sequel atmosphere that we live in. Going back to the news story. But yeah, like it sounds interesting. It sounds also kind of like one of those things, like you said, where like kind of baffling until you're in it, like until you get into it and watch it. So yeah, maybe
Yeah,
it's on my
it's also
list.
super fun to watch with other friends, especially if you've seen it and try to get other people to watch it and watch their reactions to it too.
Sure, yeah. It kind of reminds me of something that I don't think either of us watched from this year seemed got similar reaction, which was The Substance, which I never got around to watching.
I never got around to watching it. I did
Yeah.
watch a lot of the trailers for it, and I kind of
Mm.
got the brief general summarization of it.
Hmm.
But yeah, even that one definitely goes places in its struggle to stay beautiful and relevant.
Right, exactly. So yeah, big year for body swapping is I guess
Yes, that was
could
more
be a way of
body
saying it.
transformation than swapping,
Sure,
but
but yeah.
yes. All right. All right. So now we get to the my nitty-gritty, my top three.
Yes.
You kind of already know what two of these are, and I think you know what the third one
Just don't know
is.
where exactly where they ended up.
All right. So coming in at number three is that sexy tennis movie,
Oh, of course.
Challengers.
Hell yeah.
Zendaya,
That's
awesome in this.
all you have to say. That's the review of
Yeah,
the movie.
that's a
Ah,
review movie. She's
Zendaya.
awesome in this. Like, okay, honestly, I didn't really get the whole Zendaya hype
Sure.
about like her and her acting. Like even in Dune and like Dune Part Two, it was like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, she's good, but it's not like the next big thing.
Yeah.
Then you watch Challengers,
Hmm.
and then you get it. Everything just kind of clicked for me on her, being like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, she is really good. She knows what she's doing. She embodies her characters. I get it, everybody. I get the Zendaya hype now. Okay.
Yeah.
I think maybe because like I just know her from like Shake It Up in Disney that
Yeah.
she never really crossed over into like the
Yeah.
adult like
Yeah.
actress that she is now.
Zendaya is Michi.
Yeah, I means nothing to me. I get the reference, but yeah, means nothing to me. But watching Challengers, yes, that's the transformative movie that I needed to be like,
Yeah.
yes, perfect. She's great in this thing. The way she's able to manipulate the two leads in here,
Yeah.
and every scene's a freaking tennis match.
Yeah. It
Every
is.
scene just goes back and forth with these characters. And the fact that they keep it as long cuts and long takes that you feel in it, it's just back and forth and quick and witty. And that killer soundtrack by uh officially Nine Inch Nails, as they
Right.
want to be
Yeah.
known as now.
Officially.
Yes. Just yeah, makes it a movie to watch. I'm glad you made me watch this. It's more than just
Yeah.
the sexy tennis movie.
Yeah. No,
It's a
this is on my.
fantastic movie.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And
so much more than the sexy tennis movie. Like, and yeah, this is on my list as well. I'll talk a little bit more about it in a moment.
mhm,
But yeah, it's just, yeah, I'll talk about more in a little bit.
yeah, we'll talk about it more.
Yeah.
But yeah, just last thing I'll say about it. I mean, you're probably made it, but the camera movement at the very end, There's a breakdown, I think by Variety on YouTube that you can
Yeah.
watch about it, how it took them like 2 weeks just to create that sequence, and oh, does it pay off so
Hmm.
well.
Hmm.
All right. But
Yes,
I got
but
two more. But guess what? I
the
got two more that was
top
better than it.
two.
Top two. Coming in at two is more recent movie, Conclave.
Yeah.
This was going to be my number one movie, but then the
Yeah,
more I
I'm
thought about
shocked that
it,
it's not. Yeah.
the more I was like, okay, this is going to be my number two because it's more than just about choosing the next pope. It's more about just the themes of Catholicism and what it means to be pope and what it means to be like a man of God, a godly man.
Mhm.
It delves deep into the politicking of the church. It delves deep into the ambition that some people have. Like, even if this wasn't just about like choosing the next pope, this was just about like choosing the next CEO. You'd still have the same kind of feelings, the same kind of dread, the same kind of skeletons being dug up here, and how everyone feels like they're being pinned against each other. It's gripping,
Yeah.
it's fascinating. There's I mean, I think that's because it's surrounded by the Catholic Church that you see every single one of the sins peek their ugly head up in here and be like, yeah, not even like the people you think are like the holiest of holy are immune from the temptations of man.
Right.
And it's just so well done, so well shot and executed. The theme, the score, the tempo, just everything about this keeps you gripped, keeps you invested, and you want to know what's happening. At the same time, Ralph Fiennes' character is adamant he doesn't want to be Pope, besides all of his actions indicating the exact opposite. So you have this
Yeah.
interesting dichotomy between your actions and your words,
Yeah.
and how even like those contradict in like how the voting goes to elect the next Pope. It's such a
Yeah.
super fascinating inside look into this, and something I continue to recommend to everyone I meet.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know how much this is also on my list, and I'm going to talk about it too. But honestly, I don't know what I have to add because you just summed up the movie pretty perfectly. Like, yeah, you nailed the themes of this thing, which is yeah, I just don't know what else I have to say, really. Like
Well,
it's
you have to say where it is on your top five.
well, yeah, I will. But yeah, I guess the one thing to add, the only thing I can think of adding is that this is a perfect example for like a conversation that's been having a lot with other kinds of media, movies included. But this year, which has been like media literacy is kind of dying, and people don't see things or read things or play things that they feel like doesn't resonate with them, their personal story, right?
Mhm.
Here's a movie that is about choosing a pope, which for most people, that is not their experience, right? Like, but this is a perfect example of you can watch and thoroughly enjoy a thing that has nothing to do with you because of how it's made. This is made so well that by the end of it, you'll be like, oh my God, it meant so much more. Like you said, meant so much more than just a story about choosing a pope. It is about humanity and about what it means to be human and what doing good literally means. And like it is so universal that what you just have to be willing to listen to someone else's experience for once. I'm sorry, people. Sometimes you got to do that. But yeah, and so it's like a perfect example of that kind of conversation, which is all too prevalent these days.
And
Yeah.
just wait till you get to the ending. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Just
Yes, exactly. That
perfect.
yeah, I'll talk about it more in a little bit. But yeah,
Yes.
something about that ending is wild to me. But yeah.
Yeah. But it's not my number one list.
No, what the hell is your number one?
My number one is, in my opinion, the best movie of 2023 by far.
Hey, wait a minute. It's wrong year.
No, it's the right year because it was delayed. This thing was supposed to come out in November, but it
Right.
got delayed to March. And now you know what it is.
I guess I do.
It's Dune Part 2.
Wow. Made
Talk
it.
about religious movies. Dune Part 2 just takes everything that was so great about Dune from Denis uh, Villeneuve and just adds to his vision. The scale, the scope, the interpersonal characters. There's no way this was not going to be my number one list. Even
I
when I
guess so.
rewatched it recently on my brand new 4K TV, as he so put it. Still blown away by it, by the look, by the sound. Just it's so well done. It's so well made. I could sing these praises on and on and on. Just it gets under your skin. It gets into like the whole methodology behind like religion versus control, destiny versus choice, your love versus your duty, and like choosing war, choosing peace. Like knowing the story of Dune and like where it goes with like Dune Messiah and Dune Children and like the golden path that Paul has to take, which ultimately will result in billions of people dying. But is that path better than trillions of people dying? And that's what you see here in Dune Part 2 is do you follow this path that has been laid out for you? You can see it, but you do know that it does mean severe harm for a bunch of people out there.
Yeah.
But it'll save them, even if you can't explain that. And Dune Part 2 explores just that whole religious context of being Messiah, being chosen to be a Messiah, even
Mhm.
if you don't want to be it yourself, because you know what it means. Because once you find out, you can't unsee it and you can't unfollow it, even as much as you want to try. But yeah, Dune
Yeah.
Part 2 just has so many different themes going throughout it that it's so well crafted. And yeah, I think going into this year, once I knew it was delayed, it was going to be in my number one list. I was so happy to see it in IMAX earlier
Yeah.
this year,
Yeah.
and I just keep watching it, and it just continues to be so good and so well done, so well crafted.
Yeah, it did end up on my list. I will say it's an honorable mention for me. But that's only because I think I have a harder time with sci-fi and fantasy movies sticking with
Hmm.
me as much. But you're 100% right. In a lot of ways, some of the themes here are sci-fi versions of the themes in Conclave. They're similar movies in some weird ways, now that you point that out. But yeah, you're right. Like that, it is ultimately a story of a man battling his own ego in a lot of ways and trying to figure out what that means, what like whether or not he's even capable of helping the people that he cares about and what it means if he does. And like ultimately that back and forth, that struggle is portrayed really well with some surprising restraint here, especially for a big blockbuster movie. Although it does go by the end go in some predictable ways, which I was like a little bit like, okay, yeah, I kind of by the end of it, I was like, okay, I kind of figured that this is where this was going to go. That
Hmm.
ultimately, what is going has to happen is going to happen because this is a movie. But like at the same time, though, the journey to get there is beautiful to look at, impressively done. You didn't mention the acting, but the acting, yeah,
Yes.
just Timothée, when he's on fire, he's on fire. He does a pretty good job here. Zendaya, as you mentioned, also does pretty good job here.
Hmm.
Like the side characters are stellar. Like there's some really memorable performances in this thing.
Austin Butler and his shaved head just
Yeah,
being
a
menacing.
weird, just being weird as possible, just like the weirdest Austin Butler you've ever seen. Just like, and that's the one my biggest takeaway. I think I talked about this on the podcast back when we talked about Dune 2 originally, which is this is a big blockbuster movie that's not afraid of being weird. It is
Hmm.
weird. It's goopy. It's gross. It's very like it revels in reminding you of how disgusting this fantasy world can be. And then juxtapose this against this, oh, this holy ideal of a society and what it means and like the differences between these classes. And like it's yeah, it goes into some fascinating stuff that only a movie this scale can really delve into. And I think it is, yeah, it raises the bar for what a big blockbuster movie can and should be.
Yeah, it also raises the bar of what directing a movie of this scale can be,
Right. Yeah.
because a lot of the shots in here, like I mean, we say here, like every frame is a painting. Like
Yeah.
every frame can be a painting, and Doom Part 2 excels in that. There's shots in here like you think, oh, it's just sand. No, have you seen sand underneath uh a full moon? Have you seen sand underneath an eclipse? It's beautifully
Yeah.
shot. Well done. The
Yeah.
totally polarizing different worlds that it goes to, showcasing the use of color within each landscape is
Yeah.
so well done.
And
Just
no other movie
beautiful.
has this much surfing on worms.
No.
Come for the worm surfing, stay for the Christianity metaphor. Anyway, you do.
Anyways, yeah. As we do, I do have a couple of honorable
Yeah.
mentions that we do need to talk about. Uh, I mean, starting with, I don't think it's gonna be on your list. Deadpool and Wolverine, just being an R-rated movie, but making $1 billion, setting that new benchmark. Congratulations, super well done. Um, I want to say that Inside Out 2 is not on your list, but also
No, it's not.
well done, well made, especially for a sequel.
Yeah.
I think it could
It's all
have
right.
gone further though, in terms
Yeah.
of like the things that it explored. Uh, as you said when we talked about it in July, amazing for a 13-year-old girl to get over her anxiety over the course of a weekend.
Right. Yeah, I wish.
Uh, Other than that, we did have a couple of super duds this year,
Yeah.
including Madam Web,
Not on my list, believe it or not, as much as I wanted to put it on there.
Beetlejuice, uh, and I mean, more recently, neither of us watched it, but Craven the Hunter,
Yeah, no.
clear dud. Oh, also, speaking of duds, Joker, fully ado.
Yeah. Oof.
So I started watching that and I got halfway before I had to turn it off.
Wow.
I literally got to the hour mark to be like, I don't care about either of these characters. I need to step away from this. I need to turn it off.
Yeah.
I am not invested in this thing at all. Why is this thing here? I'm glad I didn't pay any money for that.
Fair enough.
And lastly, what I want to shout out is uh Ricky Stenicki. Yeah,
Oh yeah,
forgot
you
about
liked
that one.
that.
I like that. That's a funny comedy. That's Zac Efron actually being the like the actual like starring lead in that role, more so than he was in A Family Affair.
Yeah.
Uh, but uh, John Cena crushed it in that role. He's what makes that movie, and really well done.
Okay.
We did watch a couple of stuff from last year from holdovers, including Anatomy of a Fall, Poor Things, Zone of Interest,
Yeah.
Wish. But those were like at the end, Maestro. Those were at the past
Yeah. They
lives. Those
don't
were at the
count.
end
Yeah.
of 2024 or
Right.
2023 into 2024.
Yeah.
But yeah, not on our list, but notable that we did end up catching up and watching those in like January.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well,
So,
I'll go into my
what are
honorable mentions then. We'll slide
yeah,
right
yeah,
into it.
anything else I didn't mention?
Yeah, I'll start with one movie that you didn't mention that we've talked about on this podcast already, which is Wicked.
Yes.
It's also an honorable mention for me. It didn't
I
quite
thought it
make
was going
my
to be on your
cutoff.
list, which is why I didn't mention it.
So it was on my list until I saw Conclave, and one thing had to go.
Okay.
Ultimately, the thing that had to go was Wicked. I did enjoy it though. It's a really good adaptation of that first act of that show. It does have the highest highs of that show though, which makes me wonder about part two for good, which comes out next year. But yeah, as movie musicals go, as modern movie musicals go, it's a really well done one, and everybody's stellar in it. And yeah, it's a good time at the movies, which will be a theme that I'll bring up a few more times in my list. It's just, man, it's a good time at the movies to be had this year if you saw the right movies. But yeah, so Wicked, honorable mention. And my other honorable mention was Dune Part 2, which you already talked about. Didn't quite make my list, but you'll see why in a moment. Rolling right into my top five, I'm going to start with five with a movie that I'm baffled that is not on your list and not even mentioned in your honorable mentions. Did you forget that it existed?
Oh no, I see it here on my list. I was going to mention it, but I think I knew it was going to be on your list because oh, that's why I asked it because it was going to be this or Inside Out 2, but I
Hmm.
feel like I know where you're going with this
I don't know if
because
you
it's
do.
not really a sequel, is it?
It is a sequel, sort of. Um,
No, no. It's technically a prequel.
yeah, it is a prequel. You're right. Okay, so you do know what I'm talking about. Yeah,
Yes.
we haven't talked about Furiosa yet. So Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, is my number five. Honestly, in any other year, it would easily be higher because this thing is incredible. I mean, how do you follow up? Mad Max Fury Road, arguably the greatest action movie of the 2010s. It's probably hard to do that. And sure enough, yeah, Furiosa proves it is hard to follow that up. But it also asks, why try? Why not do your own thing? And Furiosa is very much its own thing. While it's very easy to draw comparisons because they are both movies set in the same universe, involve a lot of the same characters, and involve a lot of the similar big set pieces with big machines and big race-like structures. Like it does have all that. But where Furiosa goes in a different direction is to really focus in on one character instead of blowing it up about the world and really get into the psyche about why this person exists, what they're going through, and what their life is moment to moment, how they get to the point that they're in the sequel, I guess, this case, the movie that came out last.
Yes.
Um, the thing that, yeah, so it's a big, it looked amazing on the big screen. It's some of the most impressive like action sequences and set pieces I've seen. Like it does all that. But the real thing that stuck with me about Furiosa is how much it cares about the character of Furiosa. Like there is a real heart and emotionality to the things that Furiosa goes to, and it's treated with such delicacy and such seriousness in a movie that you would think on paper wouldn't have to. Like a big action movie, why would a big action movie care about like the interiority of a woman? But Furiosa does really care about the interiority of a woman. It is a lot, so much of this movie is about what it means to be a woman in this society and this post-apocalyptic world, like how you are differentiated, how you are treated because of that, how other people treat you, how just being female like will determine whether a man with evil intentions has evil intentions with you or good intentions has good intentions with you, and like how that affects your life going forward. It Every second of this movie really is thinking about this character and what it realistically would mean to be that character. And then on top of that, it's also an amazing action spectacle. Like the fact that it does those two things and does not like tiptoe around any of it is really impressive and is the thing about this movie to me. So I think all the people who focus so much on, oh, well, it's disappointing because I wanted more Fury Road. Oh, this is not as good as Fury Road. Oh, it doesn't look as good as Fury Road because it doesn't have as many practical effects. Like all that is true, but to me, I cared so much more about the story on the screen that all that conversation took such a back seat for me that it meant less, and I cared more about what was happening. So yeah, easily could be higher if it wasn't just how because of how stellar this year was for movies for me. Like it was, yeah, but still great.
Yeah, this is a movie that I regret not seeing in
Yeah,
theaters after I watched it on Max and then watched it on 4K. Like, it's what I used to test my 4K TV to make sure it was
yeah,
working, and it
mhm.
looks so good. Everything in there is shot so well.
Yeah,
Just and then the added the story. Like, my main concern going into it was Chris Hemsworth. He's just gonna have a hammed up experience being the villain of this
yeah,
thing.
and he did. Let's
And
be
he
real,
does to an
he definitely
extent, but
does.
he also is able to pull it back and rein it in and
Yeah,
just become so menacing towards Anya Taylor-Joy's character
hmm
as Furiosa that it's like, ooh, there is more to you than just big muscles. Like there is heart and there is like this gruesomeness and it's like this like primal instinct that he brings out into his character.
yeah, definitely one of his best like side roles since his role in Ghostbusters. Definitely, I think he excels more as like a as a side character than he does as a lead character. I'll just say, but yeah, no, it's just a stellar movie that I think didn't get the respect it deserved this year.
Mhm.
All right, but moving on to number four, something
Oh, okay.
confused. So
So that's the
yeah,
only, well, sequel on your list
yes,
then.
well, that is the only sequel on my list.
All right, and I think I know what the rest of your list is.
Yeah, you just
I
don't know what
just
order
don't
they're in.
I just don't know what order it is.
Well, my number four, you probably will understand why it's here. Hundreds of Beavers is my number four
Whoa.
movie. Yeah.
I thought this was gonna be higher. I honestly
No,
thought this would have been your number one.
no, it is
Just
not.
how you bugged me to hell to watch this thing.
I mean, yeah, it's good, but it's not as good as these top three. But what I will say about Hundreds of Beavers is like, yeah, the fact that it's here is a miracle in itself. The fact that this movie exists and is made is kind of a little miracle. Like, it is unlike anything else that you can see this year. Like, it is completely original. It is a concept that I don't know where the hell it came from. Like, just to revitalize an old ass kind of way of thinking about a movie comedy, thinking about it in terms of slapstick and cartoon violence, and like have it mostly be silent. Like movies just like this don't exist anymore. And here comes Hundreds of Beavers bursting with creativity and originality and just freshness. It just feels like a breath of fresh air compared to what we talked about in our news story, which is sequel upon sequel upon sequel. It is just this amazing, unique little gem buried under everything else. And the fact that it's free, that you just watch it right now, is just an amazing gift to everybody. Because like you could just experience this. Now, it might not be for everybody. I think like I would understand if somebody would take a look at this thing and was like, what is going on here? I can skip this.
I do see
But
how
like
the
if you
like the
actually,
black and white aesthetics can
yeah,
can break
sure.
people when they're thinking about it. But
Yeah,
but
yeah,
that's just like on the surface level, just watching it.
right.
As you get into it,
Yeah,
like you said, it's pretty much Looney Tunes
yeah.
running around there.
I think if you have to give yourself into it, and then once you let it kind of wash over you, you're like, oh, okay, I am in it. I understand why this is interesting. Like, and this is so funny. It is probably the most I've laughed at a movie in a long time. Maybe since I don't know, since we saw Pop Star. Like, it is that funny. Like, it's so many great moments of just hilarity in this thing, but paired with like a pretty poignant, like emotional center, I think, at the end of the day. Like, I think that it's doing so much, but also with so like being so economical. It's a very cheap movie to make if you want to compare it to like these super expensive blockbusters on this list. It was so cheap, but it feels so like authored. It feels so of this person's mind. And what other movie brings in aspects of survival video games and long play streams and pairs them with Laurel and Hardy? No other movie does that, but Hundreds of Beavers. And the fact that it exists earns it a place on my list easily. It's one of the best times I've had with a movie all year.
Yeah, I could easily put this as my top five instead if I saw the TV glow. But I don't know. I think just because I watched it so late and it's just
Right.
like I get why it's on your list. I think it may should have been on my list, but as like a 6B or like a
Sure.
yeah, like a 6B.
I
Just
get it.
right there, right on the edge, just not enough to be like, yes, I want to go and recommend this to people.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so the rest of my list is stuff that you've already talked about, so I will be briefer on these.
Yes.
My number three is Conclave, which just made it under the wire onto my top five and higher than I probably thought it would be going into it. But yeah, everything you said is true. It is such a compelling, gripping account of this process that a lot of us don't know a whole lot about. But like I said, it doesn't matter if you don't know anything about it because the movie convinces you to care. By the end of it, you are so invested in the characters and the politicking and the just pettiness of these men trying to get what they want the way they want it to, cheating the system because of how passionate they are about it. People saying that they're not passionate about it, but then later very clearly being passionate about it. Like there's so many different clashing personalities, but at the same time, there's these really important themes throughout that you can extrapolate way beyond just the choice of like of being pope. This is a really poignant movie in 2024, considering what it has to say about morality and how much morality matters when you're choosing a leader, right? Like an election year, it was quite a statement that this movie makes. And the kind of conversations that they're having here when choosing a pope are not too dissimilar from the conversations we had here choosing a president, right? There's a lot of crossover because when you think about the rise of fascism in the US, it's not just here, it's worldwide. We're seeing it everywhere. And this is a movie is a great example of like, no, these conversations are being had in the Catholic Church, even. Like there's such polarity happening. There's this pull that's happening where people are so on either ends of both ideological spectrums that like you have these immovable objects that are vying for power. And that's what it is at the end of the day, right? It's power. And so Conclave, one of the interesting things it does is talk about like have this, this Ray Fiennes character who's very much like I don't like very on his face. It's like I don't want to be Pope, but his actions prove he cares so deeply about his fellow man, and he cares so deeply about doing what's right, what he believes is morally correct by the dogma of Catholicism that he has followed his entire life, that he just does it. And yeah, occasionally he has thoughts, like about like, oh well, what if I didn't? But ultimately, he always does the right thing because that's just who he is. Should that person be Pope? The movie is not clear about whether the movie believes that. And I think the fact that Conclave presents so many solutions and has all these questions, but also leaves it open-ended like that, is like proof that a lot of these questions just don't have answers. It's unclear what morality truly is. Like being a human being is trying to figure out where your morality lies, what your moral compass is. Every person has to determine that for themselves because there is no universality in morality, in goodness, in what we believe. And even religion can't tell us that because this movie proves that even the people who are the highest up in the Catholic Church, who you'd think would have the best understanding about what ultimate moral goodness is, also have doubts. They might even have more doubts than the people who don't think about it. And that's what's amazing about Conclave is it's able to, in 2 short hours, and it feels short because they just blaze by.
Mhm.
It brings up all these questions plus more and somehow doesn't feel overstuffed or rushed or like trying bite off too much more than it can chew. It all feels like it can manage all of it and it's exciting and gripping the whole time.
Yeah, piety does not equal morality.
Right.
And I think there's a way that you can even read this movie that the Pope, who's like dead within the first 5 minutes,
Right.
a way you can read is that he's laid out the chess pieces to help choose who
Yes.
his successor would be. Even if it's not like evident, like as you're
Mhm.
watching it, you can interpret that into this movie
Right.
of him choosing who should be his successor. And ultimately,
Yes.
like it's even though it's not of his choosing, he can set the pieces on the
Right.
chessboard and have them play out.
Yeah, and he kind of did. Like it's interesting. That's an interesting lens to look at the movie, right? Because it is in itself kind of a metaphor for what the religious believe that God is doing, right? It's like God has put me through these trials to get to an end result that he already knew was coming.
Hmm.
And ultimately that is kind of what happens here. But also these men do have control over these things in a lot of ways, but ultimately they succumb to their own egos and their own ambition, which brings it back to that core thesis that the movie has, which is if you want the power, then maybe you shouldn't have it. Like the person
Yep.
who desires it so much is probably the person who should at all costs not have it. Right. Which is a lesson we painfully learn over and over and over again in the course of history, right?
Yes.
But yeah, you brought up earlier, last thing I'll say about Conclave is you brought up earlier the ending. And I think the ending is one of the most fascinating parts about it because yeah, when you find out the decision has been made and you find out who is the new pope, not the new pope from HBO, but the new pope in this movie. You find out like I did have a moment of like, oh, that's kind of predictable. That's kind of not how I wanted this to go. But then, oh, but then the movie's final and best curveball comes and ends the movie on a note where you're like, oh, wait, oh, interesting. And then leaves you with that. And you're like, okay, movie, all right.
Because that's one thing that Conclave does is that it flat out says you at the beginning,
Yeah,
everyone has their secrets. Everyone is trying to
yes,
hide something from everyone else. Even if
right,
it's not immediate, even if it's not evident. I mean, even Ray Fiennes' character, like
yeah,
his secret is that he's going to retire. He wants to retire. He wants
right,
out of the Catholic Church.
yeah,
But he can't just tell people that,
right,
especially if they're going to try and elect him to be the next pope.
yeah. So yeah,
So yeah, everyone's got their secrets that they want to keep hidden, and not all of them come out, or actually, no, that's not true. Eventually, all of them do come out.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's like it's doing so much, but it doesn't feel like it's doing too much. And like by the end of it, you're like, oh wow, that was 2 hours? Like, really? Okay.
Mhm.
And yeah, you come out of it being like, but like fascinated with the process, but also like more fascinated, I think, with the people that were involved in it. And I think that's the point of the movie is that humanity is that fickle sometimes, and humanity overtakes, religious piety, like you said. And like it doesn't matter who you are. It boils down at the end of the day that we're all humans that just are trying to figure it out.
Yep.
All right. So that's my number three. Yeah,
Uh,
great movie.
well, so it means coming in at two
Yep.
is
Is
oh, I,
it's time for a sexy tennis movie because
is
my
it
number
sexy
two
tennis movie
is
at number two?
Challengers. Yes.
Oh, then your
Hmm.
number one. Oh my
You know
God,
it.
I
You know
can't
what
believe
it is.
I
But
know what your
yes,
number one is now, but I didn't think it was
yeah.
being number one.
Number two
But yeah, let's get to
is
sexy tennis.
yeah, challengers, which yeah, like I said, you already said a lot about challengers. But what I will add is just man, is this the most like movies, capital M exclamation point of the year. Like it just makes you like by the end of this thing, I was like, oh yeah, movies, right? Like it is
Mhm.
the kind of movie that you see it and you're like, oh, you're reminded like of how powerful, how kinetic, how energetic, how exciting like watching a good movie can be because you forget sometimes. Like there's been some weak movie years for me where I just never saw anything particularly that was like, you know, really got me going as much like as my favorite game of the year or something, or even television show some years. But this year, like Challengers was just like such a good reminder of like, oh yeah, a good movie can like really kick you in the ass and just be like, oh Jesus, I get to go do something right now and use this energy. Yeah, it's fantastic. The acting is stellar. You mentioned Zendaya already, and she is great in this. But also, like the two guys that she's flanked by are also just acting their pants off in this thing. They're so different, but they're also just like, but they're so compelling to watch, and their dynamic between the three of them is always exciting. You mentioned how every scene is a tennis match, even when it's not a tennis match. And that is, I think, the best description of challengers, which is like even the back and forth dialogue when these characters are arguing with each other feels energetic and feels that back and forth. Even the camera sometimes will physically move around the room as if it is fascinated as much about this conversation as it is about the tennis matches. It is such a great combination of visual and verbal storytelling, like written storytelling and visual storytelling meet in such a beautiful way in throughout Challengers. And then it keeps surprising you too visually. You mentioned the final scene, but even before the final scene, they come up with the most creative ways of shooting the tennis. Like they just every it feels like they just like the director and the cinematographer or whoever else just had a conversation with like what are all the creative ways we could shoot this, and they did all of them. They didn't stop. They didn't let the limitations, what we think of traditional limitations of the camera, stop them from filming this movie in the way they wanted to film. They were like, hey, have you ever thought about what a tennis match would look like from the ground? Yeah, let's do that. Have you ever thought about what a tennis match would look like from the ball? Let's do that. Like they did it. They just didn't care. They're just like, no, we want to try all of this and do all of it because why not? We're a movie, goddammit. And we want to take advantage of being a movie. And that's what this movie feels like up until the very last scene, which is just I can see how somebody who is not me be like, man, this is such an FU. Like we don't get to find out what happens. Like we're just left ambiguous. But to me, I was like, hell yeah. Like it's such a hell yeah ending because you're like, because the movie, it doesn't matter. That's to me, Challengers is saying, no, it doesn't matter who wins the tennis match. If you were caring about who wins the tennis match, you didn't watch the same movie. No, you should care about these characters and what this means for their relationship and how even though they hate each other's fucking guts, they're still stuck together because they're always stuck together because they're a dynamic that will never end.
Yep,
It's
they're
yeah,
locked into the end of time.
yeah.
Uh, yeah. I think, like you said, like this is what movies are made for. They allow you to have this
Mhm.
perspective that you don't get in real life. Even watching a normal tennis match, there's stuff in here in Challengers that you don't get that perspective. You don't get to see from, like I said, the balls angle, from this other thing goes. Oh, you also don't get to
Yeah.
see the backstory behind who's you're watching playing in sports.
Right,
Like you
right,
may
right.
know through it through tabloids and stuff and like news articles, but the way the story is told in that it's about what's currently happening in the tennis match, but also treks back and forth through their lives and through everything that they've been into and out of,
Right.
that it amplifies that match. That's not just another match for them, that it
Hmm.
means something more to these two characters by the end. And
Yeah.
you're totally invested as
Yeah.
to who you think should come out on top.
Right. 100%. Yeah. Just a so entertaining and so fun. Probably the most entertaining movie of the year for me, easily. And yeah, just something that will stick in my mind for a while.
All right. But it's not your number
But
one movie. So
yeah, and I know we're running out
we're
of
at opposite,
time.
yeah, we're on
Yeah,
opposite ends here in terms of this
yeah,
movie.
we've
We're
gone
being,
over yeah, we've
yeah.
gone over already, so I will try to be brief. But yeah, my number one movie is I Saw the TV Glow. Everything you said is true, like that already about this movie. I like that it is proud of being offbeat and weird and compelling and interesting and is telling a story that you do not see. Speaking of creativity, like between this and Hundreds of Beavers, this was a great year of reminders that a movie is whatever story you want to tell and like whatever means the most to you. And like it doesn't matter what that the big studios are churning out sequels, and it doesn't matter that blockbusters are what people matter, like what matters to the back box office is that if you dig deep enough, you can still find these very personal stories that are being made in creative ways that only film can really do. And yeah, I Saw the TV Glow is probably the year's, in my opinion, the year's best example of that. It is just so much a story that is so unique to this person's, to like the director and writer's personal experience, but is feels so universal because of the detail. Like, I think people often like to think that in order for movies to be universal, we kind of talked a little bit about this with the Pixar story that came out this year about how
Mhm.
Disney was basically telling Pixar fewer to make fewer personal stories and more universal themes. And I feel like what I said then and what I'll say now about I Saw the TV Glow is I feel like that's counterintuitive because I think oftentimes, especially for me, the more specific a story is and the more specific details are in a story, the more universal it ends up feeling. Because you yourself, as you're living through life, gather these individual details, these very specificities of your life. And when you share that with other people, like if you're having a heart to heart with a friend, often you find out, oh, they had a version of that that is unique to them. But the feeling of it is universal. The feeling of it, the emotion behind it is the part that actually resonates and is the part that you feel, oh, I understand that. Because we are human, I understand that. And yeah, so I Saw the CV Glow while on its face may feel hyper specific. It is a coming of age story at its heart, and it is a story about feeling on the outside. It is a story about feeling that the culture that is around you, the life that has been set up for you, there's something nagging at you that it's not right. There's something distracting you. There's something that's telling you. Maybe it is a television show, like it is in the story of this movie. Maybe it's a television show that when you're watching it, you feel at home and you feel like, oh yeah, that universe is what I feel like it should be. But then outside in the real world, it's not that. And when I'm living in the real world, I feel this thing inside me that I just want to take out and throw away. And I'd rather be in the world of the TV show. But the real fascinating thing is the movie's thesis is, yeah, but what if you did actually do that? And then that wasn't great either. No, my friend, the problem is you. The thing you need to work on is you. And that is the thesis of the movie. And I think it's a really hard lesson for a lot of people to learn, but it's a really important lesson that I think that a lot of people have to, spend a lot of years in therapy to figure out about themselves. And the fact that this movie presents it in such a fascinating metaphorical way and like again, hyper specific way, it does it so efficiently and so well, in my opinion, that by the end of it, you're like, oh yeah, no, this does remind me of this specific thing. And that's not even touching on the fact that this is very much a trans allegory. Like, as much as the movie feels like is universal, it is also like part of that hyper specific personal part about it is that yeah, it is very clearly, contrary to what some people on the internet seem to think, is very clearly a story about the trans experience, about the queer experience. And that monologue that you mentioned, that is where the movie basically plays its hand. Is basically like, no, this is a character that is telling you, the audience, they figured themselves out. It was painful to do so, but once they did it, they were free. They felt a freedom. And the movie, at the end of it, isn't sure about, like, doesn't seem like it commits to an answer about that, right? It's like whether that is the correct thing to do or whether it's not the correct thing to do. And ultimately, that's why the protagonist at the end of the film is kind of like done. Like the protagonist has lost their will. Like they're just kind of a empty shell of who they used to be because of the choices that they maybe should have made and didn't make. So I kind of understand why some people thought that it was kind of a sad ending or a disappointing ending or an anticlimactic ending. But I don't think that means that the movie isn't hopeful. I think the movie says enough during its runtime that like that doesn't have to be you. And it's just presenting an option. Like it's presenting what would happen if you don't take advantage of learning the lesson of the movie, which is if you don't figure, like if you don't just accept that you are who you are, and if you let the world trample on you and prevent that from happening, like you could end up like this. So it's a complicated movie that is just as complicated as coming of age and learning about yourself. And that to me is why it resonated so much to me, someone who has been working on myself, for better or for worse, like I think we're all in our own way working on ourselves. That is what life is. And I think to see a movie that's so unflinching about it and so realistic about it and so, but also hopeful and also like compassionate about that process was really, it stuck with me. It stuck with me a lot.
Yeah, it's a movie that you can, I think from like my takeaway of it is that you are free to be who you want to be. You
Yeah.
can be that person even if it goes against what society around you
Mm,
is telling you to be,
right.
that you do have the power to break free. It's not going to be easy.
Right.
It's never going to be easy.
No. Yeah.
That you have to be willing to put in the work. You have to do the hard thing. You have to let go of all your preconceived notions to make what makes you happy.
Hmm.
And that's what I saw TV Glow is. It's like
Mm,
I upon like initial like kind of surface level, like you said, like if watching a TV show makes you happy, watch that show. Don't let someone tell you that, like, oh, you shouldn't watch that show because you've outgrown it. You shouldn't watch it because,
right.
like, oh, like it's a female protagonist. Like, you should be watching male protagonists. Like, if it's a good show,
Hmm.
watch the show.
Yeah.
If it's something that brings you happiness, brings you joy, why deny yourself that? Why
Right.
would
Yeah.
you personally try and prevent yourself from feeling accepted to you,
Hmm.
regardless of what society says is a normal? Like,
It's the guilty pleasure question, right? Which is
mhm,
like, why do we call them guilty pleasures? It's like it's only because of what society makes us feel that we
right,
should and should not like. But why? Why do we care? Like, why are we telling ourselves? And again, some people it's harder than others to get out of that zone. Sometimes you need therapy or some help or some sort of extra, support to get there. But like ultimately, yeah, like we invented a term basically to make ourselves feel bad about something that we shouldn't feel
yeah.
bad about. Sorry, Christy just handed me some jingle jangle. I mean, some jingly jangly. Made me laugh. Anyways,
Yeah, but like even like on our list here, like as we've gone through it for through these past four episodes, you can go back and see like we're happy to talk about all the stuff on our list. We're
yeah.
happy that we get to enjoy and experience it. Even if our lists don't line up to each other's,
Mhm.
we're still able to find something that brings us joy. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of the main lessons you should be able to take away from
Right.
I Saw the TV Glow.
So now the question then that lies at the end of this podcast is, what movie gave us the most joy as Media Boat Podcast
All right.
in 2024? We got to choose
So
one. I don't know how we're going to do it. I think it's
there's
between,
three on our list.
yeah, I think it's Challengers, it's Conclave, or it's I Saw the TV Glow.
Which is weird because I saw the TV Glow is my five in your one,
Right.
Challenger is my three in your two, and
Yeah.
Conclave is my two and your three.
Three.
So they're all like right there. Like if you
They're
put
all
it
in
like
the
number scores to them, they'd all equal the same.
they're all in the running. I mean, we can't give it to all three as much as I'd love to, because
No,
they're three. The fun part about this is, yes, they're three very different movies.
there are three very different movies. So I think when you think of movie, and that's
Mhm.
what these are
Right.
movies,
Yeah.
we put it, we should award it to the movie that is the movie that you're going to recommend to everyone to watch. They're going to
Right.
be like, oh, you didn't see it? Oh, you should definitely see it.
Mhm.
And I think it's fairly easy for us to just to call it as Challengers is the movie you're going
Yeah.
to want to recommend. Like if you're going to like go out to like your Christmas parties, go out to like see your
Hmm.
family and be like, oh yeah, I watched this movie and they're like,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't really see it. It didn't really interest me. Oh, it'll interest you. It's
Yeah.
so much more than what you think it is. And
Because yeah, I
yeah,
think out of the you're right. Of the three, it's like the most accessible, which is weird to say because I believe it's also the longest,
yes,
which is fun to think about. But yeah, like no, yeah, you're right. Like I think you can pretty safely sell challengers to anybody. Whereas it might be a harder sell for Conclave, or especially I saw the
actually, yeah,
TV Glow
yes. I think you could do a sell for Conclave, especially if it does well in award season coming up
award
here.
season. Yeah, which
But
you could.
it could. But that soundtrack for Challengers is so damn interesting, and
Yeah.
that churro scene is so damn interesting that we haven't yet to bring it up here. But yeah, that's
Yeah,
I think
churros.
you give to Challengers here.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is, like I said, it's the most capital M movie of the year. Is like a movie of movies. Is like
Yes.
the movie. Like, yeah, yeah. Anyways, so yeah, I think that's safe to say. Media Boat Podcast movie of the year is Challengers.
Yep.
With that,
But that's it. We have
we
our
did it.
list. We've
Put out
wrapped
the
up.
Yep. Push the button. The white smoke is leaving the leaving the roof right now. We have made our choices. The conclave is over, folks.
Yes.
So thanks for watching the Media Boat Podcast year and wrap up for 2024. We're not quite done though. We have one last special, final wrap up special that we will do kind of on the back end of one of our regular shows. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, you can find all of these fine episodes of content either in video form on our YouTube channel, just search Media Boat to find it, or in audio form on the same feed that you get the regular podcasts. So yeah, search Media Boat on any of your podcast catchers of choice. A bonus that I keep forgetting to mention, write-ups for these will be available on mediaboatpodcast.com when these episodes go live or slightly after, depending on how busy I am that particular day. So tune in. I did some fun design work for the picture, the image on the website. So hopefully y'all enjoy that. But yeah, so check those out. By the time you listen to this, all of those will be available. So go ahead, listen to all of our choices for favorite things of the year. And here's to a fantastic holiday season, a fantastic New Year, and flip side to 2025.
Yep, we'll be back with one regular episode, regularly scheduled, but it will also kind of double as our end of the year episode that we normally do because not a whole lot's happening between Christmas and New Year's as we've come to expect.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for that.
Yes.
And like you said, because this is the final episode of the New Year's, you can watch all of our
Mhm.
lists and what we choose right now.
All right.
Whichever way you're going, that way, that
Which
way.
other way?
All
Right
right.
now.
Bye.